Coignard is a 34-year-old French entrepreneur who is passionate about the environment. In 2015, he traveled to more than 20 countries to meet 150 circular economy entrepreneurs. In 2017, he co-founded Circul'R to help large organizations unlock their circular potential to fight against climate change. Franses is Vice President Sustainability at Coca-Cola Europacific Partners, the world's largest Coca-Cola bottler. CCEP manufactures and distributes an extensive range of non-alcoholic, ready-to-drink beverages, serving a consumer population of 600 million in 29 markets across Western Europe, Australia, Pacific, and Indonesia. Thank you both for joining me on stage.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Joe, starting with you, can you tell me, as a very large company, on the topic of sustainability, what are you doing, and how is the circular economy taken into account in those practices?
Well, of course, and let me first of all start by saying thank you for having us. It's really great. I'm loving the event. I was at the ChangeNOW summit a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, so it's fantastic just to see so many innovative ideas, and I'm loving the discussions that we're having around and about the exhibition space. So, look, from a Coca-Cola perspective, as you've said, we're a large business, multiple markets. I think that when you look at the corporate sector, the starting point these days, pretty much for all big businesses, is setting science-based targets, being really, really clear on where you're going. Your previous speaker talked about understanding your plastic footprint. I think that's a great, it's a great starting point. But fundamentally, it's about understanding your greenhouse gas emissions, your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, and setting science-based targets. I think that's the fundamental starting point. We've done that. We've also set an ambition to reach net zero by 2040. Big, audacious goal. Definitely don't have a full roadmap, but we've set the direction, and that's absolutely key. And having that from board level down is fundamental. Within that, when you talk about plastics, you talk about circular economy, packaging for us is 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions. So 40% of our emissions all related to our packaging. I guess when you think about a business that has about 79 factories across the markets that you refer to, we're fortunate in that we're packaging products in many different formats. So we've got glass, we've got refillable glass, we've got plastic, we've got refillable plastic, we've got many different packaging formats. But the key for those formats is to make them as circular as possible. So when you think about plastic, probably our biggest challenge, plastic waste crisis, we know the challenge that the world faces. We know that we're a part of the problem. So making sure that we get those bottles back and we use as much of that material again back into bottles, making that loop as circular as possible, bottle to bottle, continuous. That's really key. So that's right at the heart of what we're doing in terms of circular economy. What we do know is that we've got a huge way to go, because it's not just about using recycled plastic, it's about getting those bottles back. And that's fundamental to our strategy.
Thank you so much. Jules, can you tell me a little bit about your work and what inspired you to start your business?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, we're all well aware here about the environmental crisis. I came across as a surfer, you know, surfing the ocean and discovering a lot of marine debris. And then we're less aware on how circular economy can cover the climate change. And different studies have been released recently that it's close to your figure, actually, that 45% of greenhouse gases can be covered with the circular economy. We know about energy transition. We less know about the circular economy and the power of the leverage we have here. And what we do as Circular is to help large organizations like Coca-Cola and others to unlock the circular economy potential to cover this 45% of greenhouse gases emissions. And you know, we've been trying to understand how you can embrace a circular economy model. And we've been meeting, as you were saying, Angelica, with circular economy startups all around the world. And you know, from scratch, they are circular. So that's easy. You know, they develop from scratch circular. When you have been developing in such an environment that we are living in since the Industrial Revolution, let's say a linear one, it's quite hard to shift. And we've been looking pretty closely at, you know, Patagonia, who was one of our partners, or Interface, you know, the carpet company, on how they did this shift. And we identified 3 phases. First one, you need to change the mindset of people. You need to change the mindset of people within the companies. And the good thing is it's happening more and more. And actually, the change comes from the employees. That's what we do at Circular. We help changing this mindset. You need to find the right ecosystem to fit in, because this is how we're going to make circular economy happening. And then you need to make proof. You need to make it happen. You need to have some proof of concepts showing how the circular economy can penetrate the actual economy.
So the topic of consumer behavior and change seems to be a huge one when we talk about the circular economy. I'd love your insights on what you think kind of needs to happen to encourage the consumer to take part in the circular economy or to recycle, to send back the bottles. What are some of your insights on that?
Well, I think one of the things that we found is, look, the subject is, in many ways, it's a very straightforward challenge, right? We've got a global plastic waste crisis, but the solutions have also got to be local solutions. One of the things that we've found at Coca-Cola is that you've really got to simplify the messaging. You've got to really make it easy for people to understand kind of what actually happens to a bottle. The bottles that you may be enjoying today with a Coca-Cola product or a Fuse product, all of those are glass bottles. They'll be refilled, they'll come back to a factory, they'll be refilled, and they'll be back out in the marketplace. That's one type of packaging. For plastic packaging, all too often in many of our markets, too much of that plastic, which we know is hugely valuable, too much of that is going to waste. So to make sure that consumers really understand what happens to that plastic packaging, what happens once it's put in a recycling bin, what's that packaging made out of, making sure that people understand that if you're making a plastic bottle out of, for example, recycled plastic, and we've got 4 markets now in Europe where every single one of our bottles, plastic bottles, is made out of 100% recycled plastic. Many bottles in France are made of 50, 60, 100% recycled plastic. Making sure that people understand if you're using that type of plastic, you're cutting greenhouse gas emissions by up to 70%. So making sure that people really understand the benefits of recycling, but also just making sure that recycling itself as a process is demystified. It's sometimes seen as quite a complex thing. People don't quite understand what happens to a bottle. We know we've got a long way to go to get those bottles back. Not all of the bottles are coming back, but to make sure that people understand that material is hugely, hugely valuable, whether it's plastic or glass or aluminium. Look, at Coke, we're very fortunate that all of the packaging that we use is valuable packaging. Our vision is that none of it goes to waste. Our vision is that we can get to a place where it is all fully circular. The material is coming back into beverage packaging, used again and again. We've been investing a huge amount of resource into not just purchasing recycled plastic, but also to making sure that that infrastructure supports that collection, take back, and the reprocessing of plastic waste. Definitely not easy, and it's definitely one of those kind of behind-the-scenes things that consumers don't necessarily see, but making sure that people really understand that, understand the value of circularity. Not easy, but it's absolutely critical.
Does someone know the city of Kamikatsu in Japan? Can you raise your hand? That's really good to see some hands. I was actually there 6 years ago, so it's the first zero-waste town, let's say, in Japan. And so I was wondering what it was. Do you know in how many categories is sorting the waste? Who says more than 10? More than 20? 30? 40? 50? No, that's too much. Yeah, that's 45, yeah. It was 34, actually, 6 years ago. Now it's 45. And we're wondering how they managed to sort in 45 categories. And we realized it was because of transparency toward the citizen. You know, in each bin, you had 3 information. What goes into the bin, pretty clear. What it's going to become after that, you know, it's going to be recycled, upcycled, whatever. And how much it costs or it brings to the society. And I guess the way we communicate to consumer and being as transparent as possible is definitely a key point. And we've been meeting with Fairphone as well, you know, and you know the Fairphone actually they're there in the Netherlands, and they are super accurate in the communication because they are transparent. They say this is where we are good at, this is where we are not good at, and this is how roadmap to become the best in the circular economy sector. And the last thing I want to say on consumers is, we talk a lot about sorting, recycling, but circular economy is way more than that. There are different smaller loops. And consumer has a huge role to play, has a huge power in bulk system, in second-hand, renting, and so on. And it's definitely key to embark the consumer being transparent and being as attractive, Dimitri was saying, or sexy as possible to make it happen.
In terms of actually educating the consumer, like you said, what are some strategies that have really worked to do that? What does that process look like?
Well, maybe I'll say a little bit about a couple of partnerships. I love the theme of of partnerships that Dimitar raised, because I totally agree. Partnerships are fundamental. So just a couple of examples. We've got a partnership with Loop. I think Loop are probably somewhere in the hall today. We've got an active partnership with Loop whereby consumers can actively choose a refillable glass Coca-Cola bottle. That partnership is live in a number of markets, including France and Great Britain, with some of our retail customers like Tesco and Carrefour, making an active choice of purchasing a refillable Coca-Cola bottle. So that's a really good example. We've got an active partnership as a Coca-Cola system with the Ocean Cleanup. Global partnership, pretty new to the system, to the Coca-Cola system, but it's a partnership with an organization that is actively trying to collect waste from the world's major rivers. So active partnerships to really raise awareness of not just the plastic waste crisis, but also what we can do about it. Probably our biggest partnerships are with our suppliers of packaging material, with our partners that we're working with in joint ventures to really scale up PET recycling and reprocessing facilities, actively opening new plants in Indonesia, Australia, France being probably the best example, and making sure we're getting as much plastic back as possible. It's only when you get the plastic back that you can really truly then enter into a circular loop. So the plastic then comes back into bottles again, brings down the carbon footprint, and then can go back onto the market as a truly recyclable closed loop product.
Yeah, no, just to add maybe a quick thing on that, I truly agree on partnerships and let's say, how important it is to build the right ecosystem to tackle circular economy issues. One thing on consumers, to end with that topic, I don't know if you know about the nudge, on how you can, let's say, influence behavior, not using any kind of constraints. I think it's a powerful way to change consumer habits, making it attractive. Let's say one example, super easy. If you just say don't throw away the cigarette butts in the street because it's going to pollute 50 liters of water, then it's hard to engage really people. If you put two bins, saying one question, are you more Ronaldo or Messi? For the French guys, are you more chocolatine or pain au chocolat? Something like this. If you make a game out of it, this is going to happen because people are going to have fun, are going to enjoy the experience. And I strongly believe this is how we're going to change people's habits.
I totally agree with that, and I also think it's about making sure that collectively we're really putting a value to the waste. So again, you think about beverage packaging. The most successful way of ensuring that beverage packaging can come back is to enter into a deposit return scheme to make sure that you're actually putting a true value on packaging. So we've been real supporters of deposit return schemes. We've got many markets where deposit return schemes are actively working. They're really successful. And one of the best things about deposit return schemes is not only do they put a value on packaging so that the consumer then can exchange the pack once they've used it for the deposit back, but then it supplies the industry with the cleanest stream of material that can be used again and again and again. And that's fundamental. So you're really, through a deposit return scheme, you're really setting up a future fit supply chain for something like recycled plastic, equally for aluminium or for glass. But plastic's the real game changer. So it's probably also the only way that as a business or as an industry, we're going to meet the European targets around the amount of plastic that's got to be recycled. So deposit return schemes are definitely the way forward.
What are some of the challenges that you've faced bringing policies into different markets and different countries' response to trying to support the circular economy?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a huge challenge. If you think about some markets, I mean, I've talked quite a lot about the use of recycled plastic, for example. Let's not forget that in some markets, you're just not allowed to use recycled plastic. The legislation does not allow you to use recycled plastic. Now, I think that's changing, but we've certainly got some markets like that. We've got some markets that have been trying to go down the voluntary route. Frankly, I think we've seen in some markets where certainly recycling rates for beverage packaging have flatlined. I think about the market that I live in London. We're probably hovering at around 60% of plastic, very similar to France, between 50-60% of plastic coming back. It's not enough. We need more plastic bottles back. And that's why deposit return schemes are absolutely key. But then again, they can't just be a Coca-Cola scheme. It's got to be underpinned by legislation. It's got to be part of a broader picture. So the world of politics means that sometimes it's not as simple as just bringing those schemes in overnight. They're not that easy. So multiple challenges across multiple markets.
And yeah, after traveling during a year and a half and meeting with 150 solutions like the one we're seeing behind, with Raphael, we were wondering why the circular economy was not happening everywhere. So we were so shocked by the power, or the potential power of it, that we were wondering what was the challenges, that we're facing right now. And now working with over 100 large corporates, I don't know if you agree with Joe, but I see two main challenges for the large corporates to embrace the circular economy. First one being the mindset of people. The Ray Anderson, the founder of Interface, was saying one mind at a time. So we need to raise awareness over and over and over again and make people, make it happen. And the other one is the short-term versus long-term vision. We need companies with strong mid to long-term vision that are going to embrace the circular economy, because of course we're going to change the business model. We're going to change the industrial assets sometimes. So you need investments, but for me, the pioneers of the circular economy today are going to be the leaders of the economy tomorrow. And we need companies with vision, enough that are going to invest in the mid to long term. And sometimes it's challenging because within large companies, we know mid-management have 3 months, 6 months targets. So we have to find ways to compensate that. Yeah.
So I fully agree with that. But also one of the reasons I started with a couple of comments about greenhouse gas emissions and setting science-based targets is that when you look at what the next 10 years is going to bring, I mean, lots of people are talking about this decade being the decisive decade. This is the decade where we're going to drive change. Look, if you look at our business, we're very transparent about our greenhouse gas emissions. We're also super clear that we are not going to hit our greenhouse gas emission targets. We're not going to get anywhere close to reaching net zero or being on that science-based trajectory towards net zero if we do not embrace circular solutions. If 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions are related to our packaging, then circularity with that inbuilt resource efficiency has to be a core part of it. And if it's not, and we don't have that mind shift that you refer to, then we're not going to become a low carbon business. We're not going to be on the right path towards net zero. And frankly, I think most businesses today we're all at the stage where we realize that's the right direction, but there's going to be a critical few years where some kind of work out, well, we know the direction, we know the end game, but we're not on the right pathway. And that's going to be critical. And that's why this whole discussion about circular economy linked to greenhouse gas emissions and using circular economy as a tool to bring down emissions, to make your business more efficient, lower carbon, more resource efficient, is going to be fundamental. And if you don't have that mindset shift now, well, let's put it another way, I'd rather have that mindset shift now than coming to it 5 years or 10 years down the line. But honestly, the one thing that encourages me is the amount of conversations that are going on internally about this topic now are beyond any size and scale that I've seen in the business in the last 15 years. Without question, whether that's within our finance function, our procurement function, our board. We've got a greenhouse gas emissions target as part of our long-term incentive plan for our CEO and our board of director and our board and all of our executives. And that is driving a huge mindset shift in terms of how you think about greenhouse gas emissions.
And maybe who knows in the room what circular economy is? Can you raise your hand? Yeah, when I was working in Mexico 10 years ago now, and I came back to France to launch Circu'R and to work in the circular economy. And 8 years ago, who knew what circular economy was? Can you raise your hand? Yeah. So which is super positive. It gives me a lot of energy to see how fast it changes. Now, yet, we need to go. Yeah. Now, I think everyone realized how important it is, and I agree with you. We work with a lot of Comex CEOs and big corporates, and they all now realize how important it is from a business perspective, because consumers want it, talents want it. So if you want to retain and attract talent, you need to be stronger with it. Legislation wants it as well. So now we realize we do need to do it. We realize the bond with climate change, but now we need to do it, and how to do it is not yet 100% covered, let's say. So we need vision, and then we need concrete acts, but really quickly, as we all know, we have now a few years to act pretty powerfully if you want to cover it.
I'd like to know just quickly how the pandemic affected things in terms of the circular economy. What happened during that time for your businesses in terms of how people were behaving?
Well, it's a fascinating one, because I think that certainly during the pandemic, we saw a bit of a shift. We saw a bit of a shift in the packs that we were selling. I mean, frankly, people weren't going out. People weren't in the bars, clubs, hotels, restaurants. So we were selling less glass. We were probably, frankly, selling more plastic. People were thinking about cleanliness and sanitation. But look, I think that was it's a bit of a blip. I think people have gone right back to thinking about the importance of sustainability. I think that one thing that we're really clear on is that it's the message coming from our customers, whether that's retail customers or pubs, bars, and clubs. I mentioned before, in France, we've recently announced that all of our glass bottles will move to refillable glass bottles in the HoReCa sector. That's a huge shift. And again, that's something that our customers are really welcoming. So our customers, our consumers are really starting to demand that kind of greater amount of circularity, which is fantastic. So I think, yes, there was a slight shift during COVID times, but I think that sustainability and an understanding of not just the value of circularity, but also an understanding of the challenges that come with circularity. Time and time again, when you look at insights, people always put recycling as the number one. It's the easiest thing to do. How can you act sustainably? Well, I'll recycle. On one hand, that's great because it's simple. But on the other hand, we've got to get beyond just recycling. It's got to be really understanding. There's got to be a multitude of actions. Recycling is one of them, and it's brilliant. We want people to recycle. Don't get me wrong, but there's got to be lots of more things in that armory. So lots has changed during COVID, but I think we're coming fundamentally back to a proposition where people really understand how to act sustainably, want to do it. We've got to make it easy.
And to understand on the pandemic, well, first for the first month, I know how it was for you guys, but for us it froze everything because no one was knowing what it was about. People were suffering, of course, from a health perspective. But then people had time, within themselves to think, to read, to have a look at some documentaries. And I guess now for the past year we've been seeing definitely an acceleration in the number of projects and actually concrete business-related fundamental projects on the circular economy. And I guess the pandemic definitely accelerated the transition on circularity because people are more and more aware, and people are aware it's consumer acting differently, people acting differently, talents within the companies acting differently, and so on. And it's moving the economy on the right direction, I guess.
Fascinating. Well, thank you both so much for sharing your insights today. It's been a very interesting and informative conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, I would like to invite our speakers for our fireside conversation, Anne-Sophie, Michel, and Alexandre Bloch. In this conversation, we'll be discussing circular economy as a driver for innovation. I'm joined by Anne-Sophie Michel, who is Innovation Manager at CITEO. Convinced that innovation with purpose is key to making the ecological transition happen, Anne-Sophie joined CITEO, a non-profit organization aiming at reducing the environmental impact of paper and packaging, to develop an open innovation program that accelerates the transition towards the circular economy. Alexandre Bloch is Sustainability Lead at BeFC. He graduated in mechanical engineering, and his mission is to know how to improve the environmental impact of the solutions proposed by the company. He also participates in the development of bioenzymatic, kind of got there, cells production and the deployment of good industrial practices. Thank you both for joining me. Starting with you, Anne-Sophie, please can you tell me a little bit about the mission of CITEO?
Sure. First, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you today and share the floor with all the great panelists that we have had just before. It was very interesting. and also with Alexandre, and you will discover what BeFC does, and it's very fascinating. So CITEO, to answer your question, is the French company that has the extended producer responsibility for household packaging and paper. In France. So basically we help companies, FMCG companies mainly, to reduce the environmental impact of their packaging and paper. And we do that by helping them reduce the packaging, first of all, eco-design, recycle, but also we talk about it just now, collecting. It's very important. If you want to recycle, you need to collect, and sorting. So we help also consumers and citizens to do that. And we also now work more and more on reuse, for instance, and Coca-Cola just talked about it as well. And we've been existing for 30 years, so it's our 30th anniversary actually this year.
So thank you. Alexandre, can you tell me a little bit about your work within the company?
Yes, so at BeFC we have a sentence, to be short. We make electricity with paper and enzyme. So we started with a simple observation that every year is more than 50 billion miniature batteries will end up in a landfill or are incinerated. And this is more than 97% of them. So that's why BeFC provides a sustainable solution, look like that. So we are using paper, enzyme, glucose and oxygen to create electricity. And since we are not using any plastic or metal, it's fully organic and compostable. And in parallel of this eco-friendly cell, we develop like this bespoke digital platform. As for the cell, it's thin, flexible, and lightweight, and can be used to power any type of sensor. It can be humidity, pressure, or even shock, as well as wireless modulus to transmit the data. So that's pretty much what we are doing for the moment.
Fantastic, thank you so much. So Anne-Sophie, starting with you, can you tell me a bit about the Open Innovation Program, the Circular Challenge, and what inspired that?
So basically, we have seen in the recent years a great amount of solutions being created around circular economy, and we surely see that at ChangeNOW as well. But what we have realized is that now we need to scale up those solutions. So we have many entrepreneurs, and that's great, many solutions, but the big challenge is really to scale up if we want to accelerate and really succeed in this transition towards a circular economy. Already it started to happen, and we see more and more investors interested in investing in those solutions. We also see them here this year. Lots of people interested in solutions like BeFC and others. But that's why, because we need to scale up those solutions, that we have created this accelerator within CITEO. So it's a program that we launched last year to accelerate, help circular solutions to grow and develop. And we work on the whole value chain of circular economy. So with solutions that are working on eco-design, the packaging, working on optimize the waste collection, find new ways of recycling the packaging and the paper, and also work on reuse, bulk distribution, and also reduction of packaging. And you can come over to the booth that we have, the stand, CITEO. We are exposing and exhibiting the solutions that we are working with this year that benefit from Oneyear support program on different topics. And you will see the diversity of the solutions that we are working with, because that's, I think, very important to understand that when we talk about circular economy, what we have to bear in mind is that there is a huge diversity of topics covered, huge diversity of types of innovation as well. We have deep tech innovation, and you see an example here, but you also have low tech innovation in some cases, social innovation as well, innovation in the use, like reuse packaging, that you have some examples here at ChangeNOW. So this diversity is very important for us, and we really emphasize that in our accelerator program.
Thank you. To both of you, really, what are some of the challenges that, in terms of scaling up solutions in a circular way, and what are you doing around those challenges?
So we'll start. So there are many challenges. I think the first one, like any company, is to understand the needs of both consumer and industrial. Just to give you an example, for BFC, there are two main opportunities, replacement and innovation, and this in different fields. This can be for wearables. We are thin and flexible, so we can talk about patches like for diabetics. Medical, where we did our first proof of concept, because in a lot of brands, in pregnancy tests, there are two batteries inside. You just use it like 5 seconds, you will see if you are a mother or you will be a mother or not, and just throw it at the bin. So it's just a nightmare for us to hear that. So we just remove the battery inside and place our cell, this one inside, and it works. So we have to understand what can be done. Then for the challenges, we have to, the objectives and the aim is to produce million and billion of them to replace miniature batteries. So that's why we work closely with CITEO. Because we want to produce millions of them, we need to know what will be their end of life, whether it's recycling, reuse, or even composting. So that's why we are very happy to work with CITEO in this circular challenge to see what can be done. And for the challenges also, we have to find suppliers. So we have everything in BFC is from Grenoble. We want to stay at Grenoble, but it's also a challenge. We have to find supplier near Grenoble. We have to find land to build the factory near Grenoble. So it's also this kind of challenge. And the last one can be just to find money to do everything.
Yeah, and I think here you see a great example of an industrial startup. And I think that's the new focus for also French, but also European actors, is how to support the industrial startup. We have seen a great move in the last few years around the digital and the software startups with the French tech and all the move towards supporting those new types of businesses. And now the focus is really on industrial startup. We see with the French recovery plan, but also at the European level. We need like these new industries in our territories, and BFC is one of them. And we also have other examples. You will have seen maybe here Lactips, another French startup that is producing a new material and that is also building plants here in France. And when it comes to challenges to scale up, we identify 3 of them. The first one is the coherence, how to be coherent on the whole value chain. And this is very difficult because you need to look at all the different parts of the value chain, from sourcing your material, where do you source it, how do you source it, how you're responsible while doing that, till the end of life, and Alexandre just talked about it. How do you ensure that your material is being recycled? How do you know that it's actually going to be recycled for real? Or with another end of life, how do you ensure that along the way it's distributed, sorted, collected, all of that into in a circular way. And that's very difficult to be coherent on the whole value chain, especially when you start a business. So that's the first challenge that we identify. And we work with those solutions to solve this challenge because we have the opportunity to work with all the different actors on this chain. The second one is the business model. How do you circularize your business model? And our first speaker today, Dimitar, he talked about it with this circular model. And we think it's really one of the main challenges today for really transforming the economy. Is really around finding this new business model, creating value in a different way. And again, this is very difficult to do. If you take like reuse, for instance, reuse packaging, you really need to invent a new chain, basically, a new value chain, new logistic, new partners. We were talking about partnerships before. So that's really a challenge that we are also working on with the solutions. And then the last one, but also I think very important, is the impact measurement. So to do all that is very good, but then you also need to know how you're going to measure it, how you're going to find the good indicators to do it. And again, this is very difficult to do. We don't have yet a standard to measure the circularity impact, let's say. We have tools. We have LCA, life cycle analysis. We have ECG criteria for impact investors. We have a recyclability index as well that we have developed at CITEO. So we have tools. And now we are also working on a circularity index to really measure more globally the impact of all these circular solutions. And we believe that if we manage to solve those different challenges, then it's way easier to get funding. And I think Alexandre just talked about it, because I think, yeah, that's also very important. And they already managed to raise funds, so I'm sure they will manage again. But if you solve all these challenges, then it's easier to raise funds, get funding, and so at the end, scale up and industrialize.
Alexandre, on impact, how important is impact, the work you do, and is there any way that you measure the impact of the company?
So yes, we have visions. We don't want to be just a project. We want to build more than that. So as a sustainability lead, I have to figure out how our project can be the most clean, I will say, but how our company or our vision can be as clean as possible. So there is impact on our project. So we work with CITEO on it with all the tools we have. We also work on everyday little things, like for example, we use the same car to go, same electrical car, to go to work. We are using the train and not the plane. It's a lot of little things, but at the end of the day, it can be a big thing. So we have a more global vision, and we want that our project can help other people to be more sustainable. We can build, for example, a logistic tracker or other tools. We want to give tools to other companies to help them to be more sustainable, to have more data, because it's always difficult to have data on our supply chain, and we want to have like a sustainable supply chain and help people to have, with our tools, also data and have a sustainable supply chain. We want to be from, as Jules say, is always easier to have a circular business model because we are young, we're still young, created in May 2020, but we want to also help like big company to shift is exactly that to a more economic circular model, and that our vision. We want to be, we want to have the most positive impact on every different fields we can.
What are some of the particular challenges in disposable electronics in terms of kind of consumer habits and changing them?
So yes, so I was at PharmaPack 2 years ago, and we saw that people are using a lot of miniature battery inside, and I think we can do the same with just a paper battery, but they are saying like, yes, but if we put just a battery, it can last for years. But it's here the real challenge is that something is happening for our environment. The future is not that good as a lot of people think. So the most challenging thing is to make people aware of what is happening and change their habits, because it's too easy to just stay like we are here, just put a lithium battery inside the device and wait for years. And the example of pregnancy test is very relevant for that. 2 batteries for 5 seconds can last months, at least months. So I think that's one of the most challenging thing, and we want to, that's why we are here today. We want to move all together in the same direction, create synergy with as many people as possible, because I think if people are here today is to go in this direction, so that's exactly what we want to do.
Thank you. Anne-Sophie, for innovation to truly happen in this space, what do you think is needed? What do you think is at the heart of innovation in the circular economy space?
So basically, as I said before, I think there are like those challenges that we mentioned for scaling up, and some of the previous panelists have already talked about how we need first to change the mindset, and we think it's also very important for the circular economy because innovating towards a circular economy is really, at the end, a mindset shift. We just realized that we are all interdependent, that nobody can innovate anymore in his own space, basically, but you have to connect with others, and you have to collaborate. And I think yesterday, Mike Horn opened the ChangeNOW by saying working together is the new competition. And we really see that happening every day. Being at the center of all these actors, we see that we are collaborating more and more because all the private businesses and also local authorities that we are working with realize that you can't act alone if you want to act in a circular way. That doesn't happen, cannot work. So you really need to connect all those points on the value chain, again, to be current, as I was saying before, and also to be more efficient and to be faster, to act faster. So I think that's the main point for innovation to happen. And then, of course, we have, depending on the types of innovation, we have issues on how we're going to make these new materials. We still have like some technological issues as well. How we're going to help the digitalization of the industry. How we're going to extend reuse. So all these different challenges are also there. But the main one is definitely the mindset and how we're going to collaborate.
So thank you. I love that focus on partnerships. It's so important. Finally, can you just tell me a little bit about the program that you're doing to support different entrepreneurs and companies, the Oneyear program?
Yeah, so we didn't get into details about that, but it's a one-year support program for promotion of startups that we offer. It's mostly tailor-made, and we work with those different companies on their specific needs through different coaching, mentoring, and different modules as well on these circular business models, measurement, impact measurement, and of course, circular economy expertise. And then we offer also networking, obviously networking opportunities. And what is more important for us is that it's not an accelerator for startups only, it's really for projects. As I was saying, what we are interested in is the collaboration. So how those people who have found new solutions are going to collaborate with bigger actors like Coca-Cola, but also local authorities that we are working with. And so we really emphasize during the one-year support program the collaboration between those different actors so they really find solutions together.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you both so much for your time and for sharing your insights with us today. So there'll be a short break now, and then the next session will be coming on stage.